Well, good morning and welcome to this Business Day Dialogues Live. We're going to be talking about COVID-19, the coronavirus, its effect on our society and our economy. We've got a fantastic panel of people to talk to us all this morning. If I can introduce them, I've been given a very strict order. Cas Kuvadia, who is the new CEO of Business Unity South Africa. We know him very much better, perhaps, as as the immediate past president of past MD at the Banking Association of South Africa, but a giant figure in our business firmament. He's in all the right places at all the right times. He's on the council of Wits University. He's chair of the National Business Initiative, and he knows his way around business in South Africa. Very, very happy to welcome as well Basani Maluleke, who's the CEO of African Bank, in case you haven't met her before. She became CEO in April 2018, having, I think, qualified as an attorney at Edward Nathan Sonnenberg, joined First Rand as a member of their corporate finance team, and subsequently FNB as division head for private clients. And lastly, we're joined by Ritso Ketola, Group Financial Director, Momentum Metropolitan. Ritso joined MMH in August 2016 to head up investor relations. And in this position, he has been responsible for investor relations, as well as the design, approval, monitoring, and reporting of balanced scorecards at various levels of the group. So welcome to all of you. I don't know whether you missed the announcement last night, colleagues on the panel, but the government sort of didn't so much cave into pressure as I think pushed back a little bit on some of the pressure that it's facing to lift or to ease the lockdowns by hauling out yet more scientists that we haven't met yet, who came up with some alarming projections about the progress of COVID-19. They are projecting this is part of exposing the modeling, but it was only a half exposing of the modeling, I felt. They're projecting up to 1.2 million infections by the end of November, possibly up to 48,000 deaths by the end of November. Basically, they warn that we will have run out of ICU bed capacity by the end of June. So it all looks very bleak. And of course, we were in a dark place before this began. We had entered a recession in South Africa. We had been downgraded by the last ratings agency to rate us as investable. And we have, as we know, probably the highest official unemployment rate in the world, apart from Zimbabwe or some really sort of down and out, downtrodden countries, which we don't want to count ourselves among. And I wanted to ask if we could start this session by beginning to, not by dwelling on the present, because we all know it, but to try and cast this conversation a little forward so that we can talk about how we come out of this, because it will end. I mean, no matter how many people die, it will end. And although many of us will be sick for a long time and it will leave scars, etc., etc., this will have an end date. Whether we have more waves of it, let's say it's 2 more years, it'll eventually pass. But President Ramaphosa has sort of spoken whimsically about creating some sort of new society in South Africa after the disease has completely passed. And I wondered, Cas Kuvadia, whether that's a little bit of pie in the sky, in the sense that we'll be lucky what we're going to be doing after this is passed, or while it's with us, is desperately trying to rescue what's left of what we had, let alone create something that we haven't yet achieved.
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel. I don't think it's a question of creating a whole new society. I do think, though, that what COVID has done is it's made more stark what we all knew, which are inequalities in our society, uh, lack of capability in the state, weak economy, and all of those have been made more stark. And the discussions certainly that business has been having with government for the last few years about structural changes in the economy to get investment and growth going have simply been contracted and made more urgent. And I think that what we do see, I think COVID is going to lead to a recalibration of our socio-economy, if you like, and in rebuilding the economy, not just post-COVID, but the interventions we make now that will make less difficult rebuilding certain sectors of the economy. It's going to be very difficult anyway. I think in rebuilding the economy, we need to put on the table again the tough decisions that need to be made, the structural changes in the economy. But I think we need to rebuild the economy in a way that creates an environment for investment and growth, but also is an equitable economy, is an economy that's inclusive, is an economy that takes into account the social issues we have. And if we don't address those through economic growth, I think we will have social unrest. So I don't think it's a different society, but I think it is a different mindset on how we actually build a sort of capitalism and build an economy that is more inclusive, that does create more equity, but does actually have an environment and make the tough structural decisions
Can I,
to
Cass,
draw investment and growth.
can I just hold you there for a minute? Because while it's all very well to say we need a more inclusive economy and can capitalism sort of adapt itself, um, how, are you able to actually physically talk in any granular detail about this to anybody in the government, or is it just a conversation that sort of is idly um, passed around between friends when they meet or meet on screens like this? In other words, because I've no doubt that on the left of the argument, people are really preparing for a post-COVID society in a lot of detail. They have enormous amount of plans. What is business going to be bringing along? I mean, I worry that business is going to be caught short because you're so engaged now with trying to get to level 2, let's say, restrictions. Um, uh, the left aren't worried about that. They're worried about 5, 10 years ahead.
No, so business and under the Business for South Africa platform, which we established, we're doing a phenomenal amount of work, not just on engaging on opening up the economy now during the lockdown, but we're doing a phenomenal amount of work on a sector by sector basis and analysis of critical sectors in our economy to see how we can actually rebuild this economy post-COVID. We're looking at the impact on particular sectors. We're looking at uh, which sectors have the possibility of revamping, of ramping up sooner rather than other sectors which would ramp up later. We're looking at the receptivity of our trading partners, where they are in opening up, and a whole range of other factors. So we're doing a phenomenal amount of work on how we need to rebuild this economy. We will be engaging with government in the next week or two on that. Government is aware of the work we're doing. And what we did as under B4 South Africa, Business for South Africa, we took a conscious decision to, until now, concentrate on dealing with the impact of COVID and helping government deal with the impact of COVID, working with government to deal with the impact of COVID, and trying to manage as best as possible the impact of the lockdown. In the next week or two, we will actually put both to government and in the public space the phenomenal amount of work we're doing on ramping up the economy post-COVID. So we have been doing a lot of work. We will be ready to actually engage substantively on this. And the work is fact-based, it's data-based, moving away from ideological stuff. And so, yeah, we will actually be able to put this to government in substantive discussion.
Yeah. Well, Sani Maluleke, you're in a particularly interesting position in that you're able not only to look at the effect of what's happening on your own company, which has been through the mill itself, but you can also see the effect of what's happening to your clients and to people out in society. What, I mean, what's the picture look like? You know, when we spoke before this discussion, you talked about Africa Bank having muscle memory given what it went through a couple of years ago. What are you seeing now? Is it particular not only inside your corporation? I'm just talking about what sort of view you get of the effect of this pandemic on your customer base.
A lot of what we pay attention to, Peter, is the number of people who are becoming entrenched, the number of people who are being put on short time. We have seen those numbers go up about 5 times over the course of the last couple of months since the lockdown. So that's really worrying. And I'm sure, you know, just based on the numbers you just read out a little while ago, around 1.2 million people becoming infected and so on by the end of the year. We've also seen a lot of numbers from various economists predicting that, you know, the unemployment rate could go up to about 50%. So that's scary. And I think that's very worrying. But what does give me hope, and maybe connecting this to your last question to Kaz, is business around the world has been talking about this idea of shared value for a very long time. And the intention there has been to say, you know, capitalism as we know it has not been successful in distributing wealth equally across across different sectors of society, and that this creates an unsustainable way for all of us to live. And in South Africa, it's worse than in other countries potentially because of our higher Gini coefficient. But I think the key remains people are better able to survive or to be more resilient in the face of crises. And it sounds like we will have more and more crises as we progress as society. And that means we need to be able to pay people a living wage. It means we need to create an environment where people are able to save so that they can be resilient. We need to create an environment where people can actually afford decent healthcare so that they can be resilient from a health perspective as well. So I must tell you, for me, that's a really big deal. I think it makes me feel very hopeful. At African Bank in particular, what we've been looking at as well is this idea about, you know, we've been known predominantly as just, you know, an organization that gives microloans. And we've been investing a lot in thinking through how do we become the bank that actually advances lives as opposed to just, you know, distributes or grants loans, because often that's not seen as progressing people's lives, albeit it does, right? If you are in need of cash flow. So I think that conversation for us is a big one as we go into this pandemic.
Yeah, but are you seeing sort of openings for at least a discussion about a universal basic income, or you know, when you talk about inclusivity, it's got to have some meaning. So it's got to mean what it says. Inclusive is an easy word to understand. How do we not leave anybody behind?
So the idea of a universal basic income is very attractive. Arguably in South Africa, we have UBI. In the sense that there's so many grants that are distributed across the economy to different people. I suppose the key becomes, well, are those grants enough? And if they are they actually helping people to move out of poverty? Are they having the impact that we want them to have? We need to have a conversation about what do we want UBI to give us? You know, do we want people to have this basic income and still invest in their own development of skills or whatever it is, or in developing new businesses? You know, we need to know what it is that we want to achieve with UBI before we start rolling out. And that's assuming, of course, that we have enough fiscal space to have UBI in South Africa.
Yeah. Ritso Katolo, when we spoke earlier, we spoke a little bit about the data you were beginning to see from your position at Momentum Metropolitan. As lockdowns were eased around the world, data from the States, data from Europe. When lockdowns after severe outbreaks of this pandemic, like in the US, in the UK, when they do begin to ease significantly, because I don't think ours really has yet, although large parts of the country seem simply to be ignoring it. What do you see when you look at the data? Are people being careful or are they going crazy?
I think the vast majority of people are being very careful now. Obviously, you'll pick up stories of young people crowding into bars on the first night, but I mean, that's really the minority. All of this data is really only 2-3 weeks old. So it's a bit, you know, be a bit careful with that. But I think one of the more fascinating data sets I saw was metro commuter data from 30 big cities in China. And you can see that after about 2 weeks, about 2/3 of people are back to offices. So about 1/3 of people remain working from home or sort of distance working. What is maybe more surprising is that weekend traffic remains at 50%. You know, so people actually return to work a little bit quicker than they return to their normal social behaviors. The other one is that historically you always had a spike on Friday nights where people went out. You don't see that anymore. You know, so I think people are being careful even post the resumption of, let's call it, reasonably normal life. The US data set is also quite interesting from Google, which shows that shopping malls are about 10-20% emptier, so running at about 80-90% capacity. Very similar work data, 60-70% capacity to the China data. But what is quite not surprising, but I think interesting to me is number of people using parks and outdoor sports facilities has nearly doubled. You know, so as the lockdown has been lifted, people are really enjoying the outdoors, and it makes sense. I mean, self-preservation a little bit as well, is that there's only been one case of an outbreak in outdoor environment. You know what I mean? So being outdoors, being out in the sun, it's actually very low risk, and people are really enjoying that. So post-lockdown, the first thing people do is they go out, they go play golf, they go to the park. You know, they don't head back into the nightlife. So people sort of take care of themselves.
I mean, one of the things that you would do, you particularly, is manage risk. Would you expect our economy? People have been very, very downbeat about their projections for our economy, that we're going to be in a complete mess at the end of this. And I sometimes wonder whether we don't overdo that a little bit. I mean, do you expect us to, you know, will we very sluggishly try and come back to something, or is there any chance here of a quicker recovery than we might be expecting? I'm not talking about a V-shaped recovery, but not necessarily an L-shaped recovery.
Yeah. So, I mean, my base case is probably a 10% shrinkage in the economy in the coming year. So my base case is actually quite negative as compared to the norm. At the same time, human ingenuity is extremely powerful. You know, so some of the data I've seen from the US, where there has been reopening, people find ways. I mean, I've seen pictures of restaurants with little plastic tents, and, you know, people make a plan. You know, so I think if you have limited restrictions in place, people will find a way to minimize the economic damage. So I think the longer and more comprehensive set of restrictions we have, the more boundaries we have on that human ingenuity, and the longer the economic recovery will take. So short answer is that I think in South Africa, we're probably looking at about a 10% reduction in the current year. If we come out of the lockdown a little bit more trusting people and businesses, maybe we can reduce it to 7 or 6, but it's not, I don't see a very quick recovery no matter what we do.
Yeah. Basani Maluleka, I just wanted to ask you, as particularly at African Bank, how well are we able to measure the potential for what we could call the grey economy, the informal economy, to survive something like this? Because we don't measure it at all, do we?
We definitely don't look at that. So what we typically do at African Bank is we only grant loans to people who are in the formal economy. Yeah. As a result, we have a fairly good measure of what's happening in that environment. And as I said, we are seeing people, you know, receive less income. We're starting to see that our collections are not as strong as they were 2 months ago, which is all to be expected. But I like what you're saying, Peter. I think there must be scope for us to be able to recover from this reasonably quickly. In some respects, for me, it's encouraging that we had expected to see the infection rate increase a lot sooner than it has, or was expected to. We expected to see ICUs being overwhelmed a lot sooner, and they haven't been. So it might well be that there is some secret weapon that we have.
Some secret magic.
Yeah, and the point is, you know, the more hopeful we are, I think the more human ingenuity comes to the fore. And I think there's definitely scope for us to hold on to the view that this year, while will be terrible, that there is still scope for us to do something from a business perspective to ensure that we don't have a complete collapse of the economy.
Yeah, and just to stick with you for a minute, I mean, and draw the other two participants in as well. The conversation about reforming capitalism is a difficult one, because the ruling party is never really been comfortable with capitalism in the first place, let alone reforming it. It's instinctively an anti-capitalist party, even though it might be running a market economy. Is it possible, do you think, to have a conversation with all the social partners, with the unions, with the government, with society about creating a kind of a new consensus in South Africa? Yeah, after the Second World War, there was a consensus forced, for instance, on the Germans. They had to behave in a certain way. Unions had to sit on company boards, so that you could not have, again, a company like IG Farben, which was a paint manufacturer, making, you know, gas for concentration camps and all this kind of stuff. So it just, I mean, is it possible to sit down and simply say, listen, we're going to actually do something, and here's an idea, and what we'll all do, each side will put their most precious things on the table, and so that nothing is not on the table, and try to arrive at a new consensus?
My idealistic self says that has to be possible. If what we are expecting around the economic growth plays out, right? So if the economy contracts by up to 10%, or some projections are that it will contract by up to 16%, you know, and we start to see people dying and getting infected, and we start to see that, you know, this massive change in our economy, I think it forces people to have to think differently. You know, as they say, don't waste a crisis. So I'm really hoping that as we all look around us and we think about the country we want to have and how quickly it could all slip away, that we all want to then bring our best selves and our best ideas to the table to say, how do we do things differently? Look, in many ways, maybe I am a socialist, and I definitely have a view that we cannot continue to live in a country where the inequality is what it is, where people have got no social mobility or economic mobility. It just doesn't work. It makes all of us feel more insecure, less safe, and it makes for a horrible way to have to live your life. You know, none of us want to be living behind high walls and burglar bars. So hopefully we can come to the table as this thing evolves, and start thinking through building a pathway or a roadmap to creating a more equal, more inclusive economy.
I mean, the person obviously with the experience here is Cas Cavadia, because he knows what it's like to talk to the government. He knows what it's like to be idealistic and how quickly that can dissipate, Cas, when it comes to sitting down and talking to ministers or the cabinet or whatever it might be. How idealistic are you allowed to be when, if you're a Basani and you get into that meeting room, and you know you're surrounded by the great and the good in government?
Look, I'm not. I don't think this is so much about idealism anymore. I think this is about some real hard realities. I think we must move away from the isms, whether it's capitalism or socialism or whatever you want to call it. The reality is that if we want to get to 6-7% growth rates, sustain that, get investment in, we can't do that if the vast majority of our people are outside of the formal economy and are not enabled through economic growth to actually take charge of their own lives and improve their lives. Can
I just ask you though, why can people not in the informal economy not do that? I mean, they're free from all of the rules and the restrictions that bind people in the formal economy.
No, so let me rephrase that maybe. That the vast majority of our people have got to be involved in economic activity that actually enable them to accumulate savings, accumulate assets, to be able to trade on those and to improve their lives. Now, that's what we need to manage. If we don't do that, then we can't get to the 6 or 7% growth rates, let alone sustain them. And it's downside for every sector of our society. So I think that we don't have too many choices anymore. It's not just COVID, it's the downgrades, which we've sort of downplayed
Yeah.
because of COVID. But the moment we start going back to markets to raise money as we start rebuilding the economy, we're going to feel the impact of that downgrade. And so I think that you're right. We need to put on the table what's precious to us. There's going to be trade-offs. There's going to be compromises. We need to think about the long-term sustainability of our social economy. All of us, not whether you're on the left, right, center, or wherever. And these are going to be hard discussions, and it's going to need very, very critical leadership across the board. Otherwise, we must accept that we're going to slide down, and I think we need to avoid that at all costs. So
Is the leadership there on all?
I think there are pockets of leadership there, and I think we need to ensure that those come to the fore. I think there's sufficient good people out there and in these discussions who appreciate this, and I think that we've just got to work away at it, but do so with extreme urgency and criticality at the moment. Yeah.
Risto Katola, as from the banking and financial sector point of view, you're going to be much more impacted, I suspect, by the aftermath than, say, South African breweries, although it might be in trouble now. It's certainly going to have caused a celebration at some stage. What is it? What have banks got to offer this society as it comes out of, or while it deals with this pandemic or this epidemic in our own borders? What leadership can you provide? I know that the financial sector's contributed to, to a sort of a bailout package, but you hear so many customers of banks, not yours, but others, who have trying to raise money and trying to get an extension of an overdraft and being told no, shutting their businesses. What can banks do really to make a difference right now?
Yeah, so I come from the insurance side, but I'll have a look at the banks as well. I mean, we've been asked the same question: what can we do? And I suppose in the short term, we are providing clients with more flexibility. You can miss a premium or two. You're going to reduce your cover. We're quite relaxed about it. We even provide some, I wouldn't say total freebies, but we'll still cover you even if you miss a few more premiums. So we're trying to be flexible. But the reality is that, and I think Basani will agree with me, you can't expect banks and insurance companies to bail out the country from a systematic event. We can help, but we don't have a balance sheet big enough to just make all the problems disappear. We can only be part of the solution, and being part of the solution, in our view, is that we continue to run our business well, we continue to employ our people, we continue to provide services as much as possible. Insurance is important, for protecting incomes, for being able to access credit. So I think we have a purpose to play in society and the economy, and we continue to do that. But I do push back a little bit on the idea that we can forever continue sort of, putting money back into the system.
As an insurer, are you in any way particularly exposed to an event like this? I mean, or is it? What is this? What is this? Is this a natural event? Is this a God?
Yeah. No, I mean, we're covering all the claims that are arising out of this. I mean, just for your own interest, we have had 5 death claims until yesterday, and 7 income protection claims. In other words, people who couldn't work because they were ill. So we had 12 cases, which is small in the grand scheme of things, but I mean, we need to be there to make sure that no matter how bad the thing gets, we can pay those claims. Now, you mentioned those numbers right in the beginning. our models don't suggest the numbers are going to be anywhere near that.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure our balance sheet is strong enough to be able to settle claims if it does get that bad. Yeah, so, and also what people forget is, in some ways, the insurance companies are as exposed or maybe even more to financial markets than the banks are. So you can imagine the chaos in March, you know, how much strain that put on our risk management and our treasury functions and so on. You know, so part of the crisis already played through, which was the financial market crisis. The market is forward looking. You know, at the moment, we're dealing with the operational issue of how do we service our clients, you know, when we don't have face-to-face. And later on, we're going to have the economic environment of what do we do when people can't pay? And we'll try to accommodate as much as we can, but we can't accommodate forever.
Yeah. Cas Kuvadia, what are you at the moment asking your government? I understand business wants level 2, you know, tomorrow. No, that's not going to happen. How do you keep on talking to somebody who nods their head politely at you and immediately sort of forgets about what you'd spoken when you leave the room?
Look, we in constant engagement with government on the lockdown and the alert levels for the lockdown. So just to say, work that we've done show that if we stay at level 4 much longer, in the data we've done, we believe that the economy will contract at about 14.5% this year. If we go down to level 2 sooner rather than later, that contraction goes to about 10.5%. So it's significant. And we are impressing on government and that need to have a mindset that says, open up the economy with a few exceptions, instead of having a phased opening of the economy with long list of prescribed products and goods that you can purchase. It just does not make sense. We don't believe that there's a health reason for that anymore. In fact, if you open up the economy with conditions where employers need to screen and ensure safety of workers and so on, you are actually ensuring that far more people actually go through screening, can be referred for testing and so on, than is currently the case during the lockdown. So look, it's an ongoing engagement. We believe that some progress is being made. We believe that at the end of the month, end of this month, there will be significant movement, but we continue to push away at it. And I think that we do need to also, well, not appreciate, but I think one needs to understand that government itself doesn't seem to have a cohesive strategy towards this at the moment.
I'm going to be unfair to Basani Maruleke and put her on the spot here. So imagine now that you were leading, you're a business negotiator, you're talking to the government every day about some aspect or other of the response to COVID-19, of the lockdown. They're listening to you, you think you're making progress, you reckon that you probably, you know, there's going to be, as Casa just said, they're confident of some progress by the end of the month. But you also know at the same time that they are pushing back at you, not in front of you, but around you, by putting out very, very alarming numbers of in terms of infection rate and possible deaths. What is it about the ANC that roots it to the spot at a moment like this? What is its key call? What is the most scary thing that they have to do? Let me just leave it there. What is the scary thing there?
I'm not a student of the ANC, so but what occurs to me as the big balancing act is the fear of being responsible for many deaths that could have been prevented. And I have a lot of sympathy with that. But like Kaz, I think there has to be some balance. You know, the other thing that worries me, right? So Kaz is saying, no, let's get down to level 2, let's get people back to work. We also have to accept that there's an increased cost that business is going to have to bear, to carry. So cost for masks and social distancing and changing office spaces. And So there's so much that we need to be able to do to make sure that we keep our employees safe, make sure that we keep our customers safe, and at the same time turn a profit.
Yeah.
So all of these things together are really difficult. And my hope is that, as Kaz is saying, that at the end of the month, the guys will have some kind of framework that says, yes, get people back to work, make sure that companies are responsible enough in how they're managing their people, as well as their customers, so that they are safe. And should we start to see developments we don't like, then we can respond appropriately, as opposed to let's just keep everybody
as Angie Mochecha was saying yesterday when she was talking about kids going back to school. And I thought very commendably, she took questions which a lot of the government ministers aren't taking, which is, and she was able to say, look, I cannot guarantee that, nobody will die. It's impossible. And neither can anybody in business, right? I mean, you get people to work, you can have the most perfect conditions at the office, but you don't control the taxi that people get to work in, or the train, or the transport, or whatever it might be. You can't make anything perfectly safe. So you're asking all the time for people to take risks if they go back to work. I know, just when I go and shop once a week, I feel coming back into my house that that I've really got to go and scrub my hands or have a shower or something like that, and I haven't touched anybody. You are increasingly aware of this risk and what it means. I mean, Ritsa, are you taking? I mean, are you offering life insurance to anybody at the moment in South Africa? I mean, is it a big category for you?
Yeah. So death cover, which is relevant to here, is probably our most profitable business, our main business. We're offering cover. As I said earlier, I think we've taken the view that the disease is serious, but it's no more serious than most of the major pandemics we've seen in the past. And as an insurance company, we think that we have the reserves to handle that. I just want to get back to you as well is that you say you can't promise that nobody will die. I can tell you now, you can never ever make a promise, no matter what time of day, what year it is. I mean,
but the reason I said that, Ritsa, was that the president keeps saying we have saved so many lives.
Yeah, I think we have saved lives. I think we have probably saved lives, but the point I wanted to make is that even in the modern world, economic activity has to have some risk, financial risk and risk to your health. Our weekly non-natural deaths, accidental deaths, violent deaths, is down from 1,000 a week to about 400 a week at the moment. So the lockdown has actually reduced deaths from other causes, car accidents, work accidents, and that really that's the counter side of not having economic activity. Schooling is very topical. I come from Finland, so I should probably be more of a socialist than Basani, but like I always amazed me in Finland is how these little 6-7-year-old kids go to school on their own, on their bikes and walk, and I'm so nervous they're next to the road. Are they going to see the red, but kids need education. The sad reality is that there are going to be some accidents, but kids need to go to school. Obviously you don't want to put them into school when the probabilities are extremely high that something's going to happen to them or their families. But when the risks are modest, that's the same as going to school by bus, going to school by car. We can't wait until there's no deaths, because I don't think we're ever going to get there. We have to wait until the risks are more balanced, and then we start reopening. And I think that businesses can do a good enough job. So I support Busa in terms of accelerating the reopening. I think the net impact on deaths will be quite modest. And the other data, I'm hogging the mic a bit now, but the other data we mustn't forget is, while we're in lockdown, it has other negative mortality effects. So if I look at our medical scheme data, the number of people being diagnosed with cancers is down. The number of people reporting cardiac events is down. I can tell you now, people aren't healthier. They're just not going to the hospitals. So I think there is some negative impact on sort of preemptive medicine at the moment.
They're not going to hospital because they're scared of what will happen to them when they're there.
That's right. But I can tell you now, if you get diagnosed with cancer 2-3 months later, there is some cost there. You know, so nothing is perfect. I mean, it's a hard choice. I agree with Basani. It's hard for the government because if the deaths go up, they are going to get criticized. You know, and maybe it's easier to defend long-term deaths than it is immediate ones. I don't know.
This is the thing that gets to me, Cass, is this fear of blame. And I was trying to persuade Basani to arrive at an explanation, but I failed. And I understand why. I mean, but what are they most scared of? I mean, you're talking directly to government. You're saying you think you're getting through to them. You must be able. They must be able to tell you what it is, why it is that they're not doing what you want them to do.
Look, Peter, I think it's a bit more complex given our situation than whether they fear criticism for perhaps people dying or whatever the case may be. That's obviously an issue. But having said that, even their own scientists tell them that we will spike. Okay, whether we spike at the end of July or at the end of August or at the end of September, we will spike. And we haven't seen the worst of this yet, all right? And we've all accepted that. But I think there are also other issues. So one of the things we haven't discussed today, which has been in the public space for quite some time, is a sort of securitization of the state currently, right? There are people in government that would want things like lockdowns and so on to continue. There are forces at play. And that's why I said earlier that government doesn't have a single cohesive strategy towards this, and that's been one of the problems. So the tobacco issue was just one example where the president says we're going to lift the ban on that, and one of his ministers 2 days later say something different. So I think there are forces at play in the ANC. There are forces at play which then feeds into forces at play in cabinet, and I think it's a mix of all those factors. And I think the responsibility of organizations like BUSA and its members is to continue on a fact-based basis to grind away with government to say, look, this is the work we've done. Here's the inputs. This is what the output is. Let's talk and let's continue to talk. And we must make as much progress as we can. It's not a perfect science, but we just want to grind away at it.
In the process of grinding away, are you finding that the number of people that you're grinding away at is increasing or decreasing? I mean, is it the same band of faces? You're obviously not grinding away at Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. You're obviously not grinding away at Bheki Cele. You're grinding away at the president, his economic ministers, and perhaps William Kiza, who I think has a good understanding of what the economic impact of this all is.
Yeah. So and we're talking extensively to Ibrahim Patel because he is one of the point people here, and we think that. So if you looked at the NEDLAC meeting that was held last week, NEDLAC constituency, the president and his ministers, there was a clear indication that we seem to be making progress. So there was talk from government about opening up with few exclusions, which is what we've been talking about. And indication that they want to move toward that by the end of this month. So I think there is progress. I think that there is a greater sort of appreciation in government on the economic impact and a greater appreciation in government that lockdowns in the form that we're having at the moment per se does not mitigate against the health aspects of this virus, and that we need to have a different mindset on this.
Yeah. I want to just, some of the audience is asking interesting questions, and perhaps this is something for you, Basani. Peter Setu says planning for SME recovery has to include non-bank credit providers. Focusing on banks alone will exclude large segments of consumers and businesses. are there any plans to involve non-bank credit providers in a more targeted manner? And I think that I'm going to put that to Basani, but Cass, you equally, whoever wants to take the question.
Look, I definitely think Kaz is better positioned to respond to this than I am. South African Bank does not service the SME sector, albeit we know that a number of our customers always say that they are funding businesses when they take loans from it. So that's our view on it. That to the extent that people do come to us for loans, we'll always.
That's a non-bank credit provider would be what?
Well, it would be there are large. I mean, some of the insurance companies are credit providers. There are micro lenders. There are other credit providers that do more than micro lending. So there are a whole host of them, and I think that certainly in the work we're doing under the Business for South Africa environment on the role of the financial sector, we are certainly talking to non-bank credit providers as a significant sector in this. I think that some of the non-bank credit providers are also talking to some of the bank leadership on whether they can utilize or be part of the 200 billion rand credit guarantee scheme that's been put together between government and the banks. And so I agree with Peter. I think that non-bank credit providers need to be part of this equation.
Yeah. Herman Warren wants to know, we're almost at the end of this month. When do you anticipate an announcement on moving levels, Cass? Will it be before the end of the month?
It has to be before the end of the month. I think the president, I just got a note now to say the president is consulting political parties today. He consulted at NEDLAC last week. So I think well before the end of the month, we should have some sort of announcement on this, because the president has indicated that by the end of the month, they want to try to move to level 3. And so I'm sure there will be announcements.
Yeah. And Risto, I mean, once again, from an insurance point of view, do you have a sort of forward plan? I mean, are you able to look at South Africa in 2 years, or maybe that's too extreme, in a year? Are we still in this situation? Do we look differently? How do you plan your business for the medium term in a situation like this?
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of the recent activities have almost been forced upon us. So we were forced to take people to work remotely. We were forced to accelerate some of our digital initiatives. Now, in a year from now, hopefully the lockdown is a distant memory, and hopefully businesses are trying to build back up on their feet. Obviously, the economy will still be weak. Now, from our business perspective, I do think that we're probably only going to have 85% of people back at offices. I think a lot of people have found the work from home experience it works for them, productive for them, and we're quite open towards that. I think also a lot of people have been forced to adapt digital tools they didn't use before. I mean, I didn't know what Zoom was 2-3 months ago. I spend way too much time on it every day. Our sales advisors, what I find interesting, I mean, Peter, you might find this interesting as well, is that some of our more experienced sales advisors are the ones who have really learned to use technology well, because they have deep relationships with their clients. Because the clients trust them, it's easy for them to Zoom and WhatsApp and do business. It's actually the younger advisors who don't have that deep relationship. Even though they know the technology, they don't have the level of trust required to use it effectively in terms of financial advice and selling and so on. So there's lots of different things happening. But the short answer is that I do think that, the mortality rates will end up being quite a bit more modest than most people think. I mean, even internally, we have massive debates. There's lots of models. But I will put my head on the block and say we'll have less than 10,000 deaths in South Africa. In other words, it will be a bad.
But let's say by the end of November.
Let's say by end of November, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think we'll get through it.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Where does the overestimations come from?
Yeah, there can be 2 or 3 reasons. I think the case fatality rate is the first one. So a number of people that contract the disease and die. When the disease first broke out, people spoke of 2 to 3%, even maybe 5%, which would have been similar to the Spanish flu or even higher. 5% is closer to yellow fever type of levels. In reality, in South Africa, we think that the fatality rate will be about 0.5% per infection. Now, that is slightly above the global average, and it reflects maybe the socioeconomic nature of South Africa. So there's quite a bit of comorbidities and health issues to start off with. So for 10,000 people to die, I'm trying to do mental maths now. It probably means 2 million people need to be infected, which was where I got my rough number now when I spoke to you. The other one is the spread of the disease. Now, we don't have the whole day, but the spread of the disease, the R0 factor is also a little bit lower than originally thought. I think the case fatality rate estimate was more wrong in the beginning, whereas the R0 factor has only been adjusted down a little bit, in that obviously this disease is mainly spread through droplets as we breathe and talk and shout and sneeze. And I think social distancing works very well. So you don't need a hard lockdown. I think social distancing does almost as much. So that's the other estimate people got wrong. People didn't realize just how well the R0 will get controlled through lockdown and social distancing.
Yeah. And panel, are we sort of basically agreed with that? Basani, do you think the estimates given out last night are a bit wild? Do you think it's not going to be that bad?
So I'm not an epidemiologist, so it's hard for me to take a view on whether or not they're right. But I must agree with Risto. I've been back in the office a few times every week, and every time I go in, there are more people who are coming into the office. We have implemented social distancing. When you enter the building, there's somebody to spray you with sanitizer. People's temperatures are being taken every 4 hours. So I feel very safe there. And I think our people also feel very safe there. So I think there are definitely ways to manage the spread of the disease. Again, people will die, and maybe we need to accept that this is going to be the year where that's just a risk that we all have to live with. I like Risto's idea that only 0.5% of people will die. So that's very encouraging, makes me very happy. And also, look, I'm asthmatic. So for me, I think for the first month, I was terrified that I'm going to get this thing and not recover. But having seen how much more careful people are, having seen that people are wearing masks and being cautious, I'm a lot more optimistic about us being able to handle this and get the country through this safely.
Why is it, Cas Coovadia, do governments treat their population sometimes like children? Why do they infantilize us? We are a responsible people. We do know how to take care of ourselves. And I think that Basani is absolutely right. Generally, if you give people information and say, listen, this is likely to happen to you if you behave in a certain way. Wear a mask, clean your hands, wash your face, whatever it might be. What is it about governments that makes them want to, once again, I suppose you come back to the, wanting to avoid blame.
Yeah, look, I think we have, governments do look at people and try to create dependency. I don't know, I guess that's what politics is about. Okay, it's control, it's dependency, it's it's the way politics works. I don't know. I'm not a politician, thank God. But you're right. By and large, I think people are responsible. If you leave people to their own devices, I think they look after themselves, and that's what we should do. To me, and I hear what Risto is saying, probably, and definitely in a better position to assess that than I am. The only concern I have is that we haven't tested enough people, and particularly in areas with denser populations. I think we need to really jack up our testing to get a better understanding of the spread of this virus. We've tested sort of over 110,000 people since the virus began. In other parts of the world, they're testing 250,000 people a day.
Yeah.
And we really need to devote a lot of resources towards that to get a better
I think it's
understanding
also
of
sometimes
where
about
we are.
screening. I've had 3 members of my family now come down with COVID-19. They've all recovered, thank heavens, but they've all reported a complete loss of the sense of smell and taste. And when we screen people in South Africa, we don't ask them any of those questions. We ask them if they're feeling sick. Have you got it? We ask them if they've got a respiratory tract infection or a temperature, and we might be missing some obvious ones, because apparently the loss of taste and smell is a dead cert indication that you're in some trouble. Very lastly, Cass, economically, are we in danger in this country of defaulting on our debt because of this? This is a question from Francois Goltig, who's watching us. Can we get through this debt-wise?
Look, we're in an extremely difficult fiscal situation. We were in a difficult fiscal situation even before COVID. I think it's going to be an extremely tough economic trajectory to rebuild from here. Let's not kid ourselves. And we're going to have to, look at trying to secure funding from people that we up to now have considered taboo.
Who would that like? For who?
Well, the IMF of this world and so on. And the reality is that we need to actually improve our fiscal situation. We need to get our economy going. So,
and you're all
I think we will rebuild. But it's going to be a long, tough road, and that's why we need to pull together.
You're all bankers. This is my last question. Without any question, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, who is now going to restart a government-owned airline, is going to come knocking on your doors asking for finance. I don't know whether African Bank Basani Maluleke will be the first door he knocks at, but what are you going to tell him when he does?
Fortunately, he won't be knocking on our door, but I mean, I think that's unpalatable. And I agree with Kaz. I think government is in a very difficult space. I do think IMF funding becomes much more of a need for us. I think the amount of money we need to spend to get the country to survive COVID is vast, and they're going to need to call on those resources. And I think once they do, it automatically will come with some conditions around what they can and can't spend that money on. And that I must say gives me hope that we will eventually make the right calls around the structural changes that we need to make.
Risto Katola, you're basically finance director of Momentum Metropolitan. No money for a government airline from you guys, I presume.
No. So obviously we invest heavily in government bonds and SOE bonds, but SAA is not something that we would rush out to invest more in. In fact, we would like to get our money back on SAA. And I would also and Kaz made a good point. The fiscal situation is challenging.
Yeah.
And one of my concerns is that government uses this as a reason to increase taxes, which I think will be very detrimental to the recovery in the economy. I think it needs to be more on the spending side that the government needs to sort this issue out. Yeah. I mean, I read a term in the American press a couple of weeks ago called fiscal distancing on top of social distancing. Yeah. And the whole idea is that the private sector has a much better chance of accelerating the economic recovery than the public sector does. So I think the public sector needs to play a supporting role. Yeah.
Cass will tell you, won't you, Cass, that he knows that nobody in government thinks the private sector has got the answers to our recovery.
Well, sometimes the chasm between thought and reality is quite warm. Yeah, it's narrower than you think, actually.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. Listen, please, everybody on the panel, thank you so much for joining us. Cass Kavadia, Basani Maluleke, Risto Katola, it's been a great hour. Let's do it again. And to all the people who've been listening with us and asking questions and making comments, much appreciated. I've had a good time. This has been great fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Yes.
Thanks.